Howdy, y'all. It's me, Pikiss-Chris, the sheriff round these parts.
And I'm Bastard Swordsman from upstate New York.
And today, me and my posse are gonna go and bring them varmints and put them up for a good lynching. I don't know. I'm done with
Wait,
this
we
bit.
have other guests?
No, we don't.
A posse is usually like several people.
Well, you see, I have imaginary friends.
That's fair.
Yeah. All right. So before we get into this week's film, we're gonna just go over what we've been over these last few weeks. What have you been up to, Bastard Swordsman?
Well, I finally got my own place. I used to live with family, but now I rent my own apartment. Well, the last film that we talked about, I actually already forgot because that's what happens when you get old. What was the last film we talked about? It was
So
after Demon Lover.
it was after Demon Lover was Life of
Oh,
Pi.
oh yeah, Life of Pi.
Yeah.
When we recorded that, that was the first time I was recording from the new apartment. But when we talked about Demon Lover, I was in the old place, the previous place. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Living on my own, you know, I can walk around naked. Yeah.
That was. That's you know what that actually is an underrated lifestyle.
I
Just
can I can drink right out of the big gallon of juice
yeah. All the shit in the
without,
fridge is yours.
yeah, until I have guests over.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, that's a big problem I personally have is that whenever I invite guests over, I don't account for what they'd like to eat. So, like, they always go into my fridge and I've got nothing for them because it's all me. So,
And you gotta have like a decent variety, but like,
yeah.
I don't know, just, I would say like juice, milk, soda, beer.
Yeah.
Just I know you don't drink, but you know, probably like I don't know. Well, I don't know. I mean, everybody has their own kind. Some people just like the regular crappy beers, but um, you know, there are a lot of sort of hipstery ones you can just find nearby.
I mean, my parents, I bought them, like, this one, like, alcohol, but I can't remember what the brand is. But it's one of those drinks where it's like, there's an alcoholic variety and then there's a non-alcoholic variety. So,
I
uh,
mean, they're making alcoholic varieties of all sorts of things that weren't alcoholic before. Like they got hard Arizona iced teas now, and they made spiked Dunkin' Donuts coffees, and I tried some, and they they taste like ass. Not literal ass, but they taste really awful.
well, you already have to blend a bunch of stuff into coffee to make it like palatable anyway. So like I can imagine adding alcohol into that would just like ruin the entire like the the chemicals, the compound.
I mean, it's not really that complicated, but uh,
I'm making it sound like a science experiment.
no, it's not. They when they make beer and stuff, they like it's fermented with barley and shit, but I don't know, just adding alcohol to coffee is probably very not a complex process.
Fermented, they separate the waters from the waters in their drinks. How they do that if it's so wet?
Okay. Um,
That was a terrible joke.
yeah, so basically I've been here for a few weeks. I still don't have everything unpacked because I need to get some more bookshelves and stuff, but it's nice. My life is like a video game. I make money at work, then I get like, upgrades in the form of furniture, and then, okay, I'll just stop while I'm ahead.
Yeah. Sounds like a very grindy video game. I'm not a
Yeah.
big fan of like life simulators. Never got into Animal Crossing.
It's a lot of time limits too,
Yeah.
and you don't always know what the time limit will be. But yeah. Anyway, I don't think we talked about it, but a while ago you saw Oppenheimer.
Yes, I did. I saw it, basically on a whim one day. Um, just because I was going through one of my like I can't just sit at home and waste the day doing nothing. So
Yeah.
so I decided that after work I was just gonna go and see a 3 hour movie and then go directly to bed when I got home because my schedule is fucking insane. But I did like the film. I do agree with you. It is the best Nolan film so far. You know.
I didn't say that. I
No,
don't think it's the best Nolan film so
no,
far.
no. I remember someone saying that.
It's
But
probably one. It's definitely one of his best, and it's his best in a long time.
it's
But
definitely
yeah,
better than Interstellar.
it's definitely better than Tenet.
Yeah,
Probably better than Dunkirk. I don't know. I didn't watch that. It's definitely better than The Dark Knight Rises.
yeah.
I would say it's better than Inception. I don't know if
I
it's as good as The Dark Knight, but yeah.
yeah. I have always felt that Inception was just okay. You know, like I
I mean,
saw.
I don't think it's amazing, but it's from a technical aspect, there are some impressive elements of it.
I don't know. I just like no way. I'm not thinking of Inception. I'm thinking of Memento.
Very different movies.
Yeah, very different movies. Not getting into spoilers, but like I just sort of felt like the twist at the end was good. The ambiguity of memory was pretty decent, but overall it's still just kind of a like revenge thriller, but with a gimmick.
Yeah, I haven't seen Memento in a while. Some people go crazy over it, like, oh, like Reddit, one of the best movies of all time. But
Yeah, I'm a
like,
film buff.
yeah, I watch Nolan and Tarantino. You could call me a cinephile,
Yeah. I've uh,
but
I've gotten
no,
into this really obscure one. His name is Kurosawa. You've probably never heard of him.
I mean, to be fair, a lot of so-called movie buffs would not watch Kurosawa because it's not in English. But um, yeah, Memento. I think it's a good movie, but I don't think it's an amazing movie. Like it's well made, well acted, well shot, all that. But like it is like I feel like a lot of people are just impressed by the gimmick of it. And there's another movie from the year before called Peppermint Candy, which also like every scene takes place before the scene that precedes it. Um, yeah, yeah. The every scene goes further into the past. Only it's on like a much larger scale than Memento. Memento is like takes place over a much shorter period of time. Um, and Memento's more a mystery, whereas like Peppermint Candy's like a drama that sort of captures an entire time period, and it's more like, politically charged, and there's a lot of societal commentary because it's a South Korean movie, so it's about sort of contemporary South Korean history. But I think that film's a bit better than Memento. I would recommend that film, although they're
Might
both good films.
we might
But yeah,
watch it later on this podcast one day.
or you could watch it on your own time.
Yeah, well,
Um,
true. But I don't know. Given the viewers at home the benefit of my immaculate taste in media and my amazing analytical lyrical skills.
lyrical, spiritual miracle. Yeah. Anyway, Oppenheimer. I, my only real problems with it are the sound design, like, especially in regards to the music. There's like a lot of music, and the music is loud as fuck, like all the time. Um, so there's like it gets sort of like very exhausting after a while. There are like a couple moments, like only a couple moments in the film where there's not like really loud music blaring, and those moments really stand out. And the music is good, but it could have maybe toned it down a bit with how loud it was, and saved those moments for very specific, uh, points in the plot where there was like a big progression going on. Although it also does add to the feeling that, it's a big moment in history, and, he's a larger than life character. Also, a lot of the dialogue, like Nolan is like definitely one
Nolanisms.
of the, yeah, Nolan's one of the better directors working in Hollywood right now. I can definitely say that at this point because Hollywood is going through a huge drought. But like he is also, his writing style is steeped in the old Hollywood sense that like nearly every line is like sort of like a one liner or like a punchline or something. And there are like a couple lines that feel straight out of like the Avengers or something. Like
You were
there's this one
talking
line
about
towards the end.
that John F.
Spoilers.
Kennedy.
Yeah, spoilers. Um, the name of that senator, Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. Like
Jeez.
nobody from 1950 whatever would actually talk like that. They're just saying it like because the audience knows who that is. So they're like, it's like a loud like scream moment, like when they hear like Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. It's like,
I recognize that character.
I know what that is.
It's like
But
that. You ever see Lincoln?
I
Uh,
have not.
all right, so spoilers. There's a scene in Lincoln where like a bunch of people in the Senate are debating, whether or not to free slavery. And like one of them is like, next they'll be like, oh, we should give women the right to vote, and it's like such a wink at the audience moment about fucking
The name the name of that senator, Woodrow Wilson.
yeah.
Just kidding. I don't know if he no, he might have been alive at that point, but if he was, he definitely was a baby and
Yeah.
not in the Senate.
Can you imagine if he was like a fully grown adult?
See,
Ugh.
this is a reference to the fact that Woodrow Wilson was really shitty.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, sort of my problem with Nolan's dialogue is that everything is written like a monologue, and even if those monologues are really
Yeah.
good, it's always about like analyzing the themes of his work, in a way where it like feels like a behind the scenes documentary of the ideas in his head. So it doesn't feel like natural dialogue between two people existing in his fiction, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yeah. I'm just it but it wasn't as obnoxious as it was in Interstellar, cuz at the very least, like, there there is more weight to like what they're talking about in this film because it's shit that actually like affected the trajectory of the world. It's not like love will triumph or or whatever.
Speaking of amazing movies like Interstellar, I
Oh
recommended
boy.
a pretty good movie that might be even better than Interstellar.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Um, yeah, it's a very old movie from 1941, Citizen Kane, directed by Orson Welles, a film that does not need much of an introduction, but I will introduce it anyway. It's a film about um, a newspaper uh, magnate, according to the synopsis of the film. Okay, so like, guy runs a newspaper, and it ends up like getting really big, and he's really famous, but he also has a lot of personal demons, and um, his behind the scenes life is very turbulent. And the film starts with him dying. He says Rosebud, and everybody's like, "Whoa, this big figure, his last words, what do they mean?" And the rest of the film is sort of going back on his life and sort of just, kind of examining the kind of person he was, and, you know, trying to find a meaning in his last words. But it's really more than that. Um, yeah, okay, I think I've talked enough. So Chris, what did you think of Citizen Kane?
As a character biography, not a biography, as a character study of like Kane as the main character, I think it has like a really neat setup, about these people who make like newsreels, like trying to find an angle for their story, you know? And there's there's this like fun little thing where it's like they think that like they can sum him up in like one word when he's, you know, not just that he's
Spoilers
large.
for Citizen Kane.
Yeah. Uh they think they can sum him up in like one word, Rosebud, which is, forget the fact that he's larger than life, he's a real human being who's very complicated. But, they think, they can just do that. I think that's a very that's a very clever lens, like to explore the rest of the film through, which is basically like flashbacks of his life and how he got to this point, basically being like other people's perspectives and recollections, and sort of how there is a narrative to it, that's very linear, but like every person who's asked, from Kane himself in his memoirs to his ex-wife to his, former uh former co-workers, they all have slightly different perspectives of him and sort of present him in vastly different lights.
I wouldn't even say vastly different, but
Yeah. Not vast, but like different enough where it like you get the sense that they all had a way of knowing him that was like different from one another, you know?
yeah. I mean, it says a lot about like those characters themselves, how they see Kane, because I mean, even though it's a film called Citizen Kane, there are other characters in the film that have their own arcs, even though you know, Charles Foster Kane is the most interesting of the characters and has the most pronounced arc. But um Kane is actually based on a real person called William Randolph Hearst. Uh, you know who that is?
Uh, I vaguely know who he is. I knew he was
Yeah,
based on a real person.
yeah,
Uh,
you
I think he was
probably
also
heard about him in. Sorry.
I think he was also like a media magnate. Not
Yeah.
maybe not of newspapers, but like radios, I think.
No, he did have a newspaper. Um, and he owned at one point the nation's largest newspaper chain and media company called Hearst Communications. And he's also the guy who um, we get the term yellow journalism from, because a lot of his articles were laced with hyperbole and exaggeration and sensationalism. So we have him to blame for the state of the news today, basically. But he was also a politician. You know, in Citizen Kane, Kane gets into politics, but though Hearst obviously wasn't president, he was a representative for New York for 4 years. Yeah, he was in the House. Um, though he was still alive when this film came out. Um, and he was still, you know, from what I can tell, a respected figure in society. So when Citizen Kane was being made, um, Orson Welles didn't give anyone access to like dailies, like because he didn't want like it to get out that, oh yeah, this is a film basically about Randolph Hearst, and it's definitely a very critical film about that, because like however you feel about Kane as a person, like he's not like a man of many principles or real beliefs, and he sort of flip-flops back and forth. I would assume I'm not very familiar with the story of William Randolph Hearst overall, but I would assume that's also, you know, a criticism of him. And he did not care for the film when it came out,
I
of
can
course.
imagine. You can like get a sense of how Wells saw this person based on how he plays him in the film, his counterpart, I mean. Uh
Yeah.
he's very charismatic, you know. He's very good at projecting confidence and also, you know, rewarding people's loyalty or
He's
or
also very insecure, though.
yeah, exactly. Like he wins people over with charm rather than with like actual conviction or ethics. Uh,
Yeah.
uh you know, the one time he does show sort of like sort of like a he goes through with something with honesty, it's to finish uh a review that one of his employees wrote that was a negative critique of his wife's singing, and basically like put his words in that person's mouth, both as a way to like punish him for saying anything bad about his wife, but also as like a way to like sort of critique his wife's talent. Well, like
Well, he's not being like, I wouldn't say that's a positive moment for him. He's just
yeah,
really insecure
yeah,
about both his wife's abilities and also like
yeah,
everyone's criticisms of them, and he just sort of wants to shut that down.
yeah. No, but it's like what I'm getting at is like he in his world, he's framing it as, well, I'm being honest, and you know, I'm honest enough to one up your honesty and finish it for you. while keeping that negative tone. But he like we cut to the next scene, and it's apparent that he never came out with the fact that he was the one who wrote that review. His wife is angry that he let his friend write that review, but he never came out and said, I'm the one who did it. And it's
Mm.
base and it's like you get the sense that he's very like angry at his wife for not living up to his own expectations of her, and basically humiliating him publicly, but he doesn't have the stomach to come out and say that to her himself, so he shifts the blame to someone else.
Mm, yeah, he's a coward.
Yeah, basically.
Um, he has a lot of daddy and mommy issues because he didn't really have much of a father figure. The father figure he did have was like this like rich industrialist guy that his mother basically just gives him away to, and he like hates him, and he just basically gets into journalism just to spite him.
I also think it's interesting, you know, uh the film, it's very subtle about this, but he sort of gets a lot of his character traits of from his mother. Like as a kid, he wanted, like genuine love and affection from his parents, but the best his mother could get him was like, sort of letting him go away to like a sort of uh like a very wealthy elite sort of lavished lifestyle without actually giving him any of the things he wants. And that sort of reflects how he is as an adult, as someone who, thinks he can buy love and affection from others with grand gestures that are really hollow and don't give them what they want or need.
I mean, yeah, people do tend to repeat the mistakes of their parents a lot in real life, just in different ways.
Yeah.
So, Citizen Kane is definitely really influential, like from a film standpoint and a narrative standpoint. Although, like with some people, there seems to be a misconception, like of how influential Citizen Kane was, like because narrative film was still like a big thing at the time, and a lot of other directors, like John Ford and D.W. Griffith and all that, like were big influences on Orson Welles, especially John Ford. And there are other big films that played with continuity, chronological order of scenes and stuff like that. But Citizen Kane is just really good because it's a really good early example of like the non chronological sequence of events, and also the rise and fall story. Like that, I would assume this was a big influence on directors like Scorsese and other films from the 50s and 60s that don't come to mind immediately. But yeah, because it's about Kane's rise to the top of society, but then his fall, because then by the end he's like left alone, and really he has nothing aside from his possessions to show for it.
Yeah, it's really weird to me when people say that like Citizen Kane was the first narrative movie, because like it was one of the first like what we would call feature length films, I guess,
That's not true.
if even that. Yeah. But like the like people have been making, like, we love telling stories. We one of the first films was the Great Train Robbery, and that is a narrative film. That is
Yeah.
about people robbing a train, you know, that so to say that he like invented like storied filmmaking is
Disingenuous.
yeah, you know.
Well, in terms of feature length films, those were pretty common by the 1920s. Um, yeah, I mean, technically, feature length is only, it depends on who you ask, but like 40 or 45 minutes. But I mean, there are plenty of films from the 20s that were well over an hour or even 2 hours. But, yeah, like really just Citizen Kane is fun to dissect because of how well it's written on its own merits. And there are a lot of great dots, like when it flashes back towards the beginning to his childhood. There's a great scene where, his mother and the other guys there are talking about, what they're gonna do with, do about Kane's future, and they're all in the house, and then you see him right outside the window, and he's like just framed perfectly. That's a really good shot.
Yeah. They're like
The
talking about him as he's like on screen blissfully unaware of like what's about to happen to him basically.
well, I think that summary doesn't really like say exactly the point or the significance of it. It's almost like he's just a frame on the wall. Like that's how much attention is paid to him.
Yeah. uh I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of visual statements made. Like when he's with, I think, his first wife. And there's the part where they're, talking at the dinner table, and it shows a bunch of scenes, and it really just shows their relationship, deteriorating across those different, snippets. And at first, um, they're sitting very close together on the table, at the table, and then at the end they're like sitting really far apart, and on opposite ends of the table, and he's on the left side and she's on the right, and it like the shot begins with him on the left, and then it slowly zooms out and pans to the right, showing the distance between them, both physically and, of course, the distance in their relationship.
There's also like a really good line, later in the film, with his like second wife, where it's like there's this running thing where like they're in the mansion together and they keep like shouting to hear each other because they're so far apart, and she and like they're at a outdoor, stakeout, and they're in their tent and she's yelling at him for not, ever really listening to him, and all he can say is I'm right next to you, you don't have to shout at me anymore, I can hear you, when like the idea there is that he's, she's shouting because he's not listening, not because he can't hear.
Yeah, I mean, in a literal sense, she's like used to shouting at him, and but also it represents how she has to. She feels as if she needs to shout to be heard, like in a figurative sense as well, because she feels like her wants and her needs aren't getting across to Kane. Um, this is like a really so this is Orson Welles' first film, which is just insane. As a like, this is definitely one of the best debuts of all time, feature length. Yeah, debut features. He was only like 25 or 26 when this came out, And not only is he demonstrating how like immediately talented he was as a director and a writer, but also as an actor too. Like, you really just buy that, this is, the character Kane, not just Wells, but he just embodies the character that he's playing so well in terms of, facial expression, body language, of course, tone of voice and all that and delivery, but and the makeup is insane too. Like, towards the, beginning chronologically of adult Kane's career, it's just Orson Welles, how he looked at the time. But then towards the end, like, he gets fat, like Orson Welles in real life. But although he didn't get like really fat until like at least a decade after this film came out. But also, the makeup with the hair and his wrinkles and all that, like he just really transforms into older man Kane. And yeah, just the makeup is insane as well, because like it doesn't look fake at all. He looks like a real person, and it's all just the same guy throughout the whole film.
Yeah, that was like uh, the only thing that like clues you in to the fact that it's the same actor is the voice, basically. You know,
Yeah,
you know. Uh, I also think some of the other actors do a decent job. Um,
yeah.
the character who plays the the sort of former like article writer uh, who like ends up in the old folks home. He stuck out to me
Oh,
personally.
Joseph Cotton
Yeah, he gave,
is the actor's name.
you know, yeah, he gave this yeah, this like performance as like this guy who, you know, through most of the film he's on the same page as Kane, but then he like there's this one scene where he's like really belligerent and drunk and he's sort of laughing and kind of playing it off as friendly, but you get the sense that he's also like airing a lot of grievances he's had working with this man for a while now, and it's just a really well acted scene between him and Wells.
Um, there's another film from David Fincher called Mank that is apparently quite mid, but it's about so there are two writers credited for this film. There's Wells himself, and then there's Herman J. Mankiewicz. And that film basically proposes that Mankiewicz was like the real writer, and Orson Welles took more credit than he should have. But it was really the opposite way around. And if you like watch more films from Wells's catalog, like this just feels like a Wells work. It has
Like
a lot of elements that he would also include in a lot of his later films.
like even if you're gonna say that like he didn't contribute as much to the writing, like he's still the director. He's still playing the
Yeah.
main character. Like I don't get what you're trying to prove here. You know,
Uh, um, I don't know. There are a lot of things I can say about this film, but I don't know. I'm just drawing a blank right now,
yeah,
as tends to happen with non-scripted conversations.
yeah. Well, yeah, you know, I feel like if we were like on script for these things, it would be very like artificial. Like,
And yeah, we'd also just go on other tangents too, probably.
yeah. Uh, I'm honestly trying to think of like I'm not one of those people who's like this is a flawless film, I mean, I might
There,
pick up
there
more.
there's that scene of like the of it cutting to the screeching bird. That was a really weird transition.
Oh yeah. Um it like took me like a good like it took me like a good like few seconds to register that was one of the birds in his menagerie, which is why that was even like part of the transition.
It
But
was like it was a straight up jump scare.
yeah, but it's like you have to like remember information all the way from like the beginning of the film during the newsreel where they talk about all the animals that he has in his personal like garden at his mansion,
Yeah.
and like that we have other scenes later in the film like right before that transition that take place in that setting, but they never show any of the animals. So it like
Mm.
it's not reinforced in any way, and it comes off as like really random and also kind of funny.
Yeah.
But
Um so the, yeah, at the end of the film Rosebud is um found out to be his childhood like sled, and apparently this is seen as like a spoiler to some people, obviously people who weren't paying attention to the film. But like I saw this one internet image like a while ago, this like I don't know, over a decade ago, and it was like spoilers for a bunch of movies like Star Wars, Memento, Donnie Darko, and like just saying, well, I don't think it's really a spoiler to say this for most people, but like for Star Wars, like Darth Vader is Luke's father, um, and someone X was Y the whole time, and X character dies, and the, one of the things was Rosebud is a sled, and I'm like, it's not really a spoiler, like because the identity of Rosebud doesn't really matter in the film at all. Like you can know that Rosebud is a sled, and it won't really ruin your appreciation for the film or anything.
yeah,
Although it does kind of help on a second watch because then you kind of like it sort of informs you of the character because his last word, Rosebud, is like he's not really calling out for his sled. He's just sort of reflecting on his childhood, like how, he wishes he could go back, how, that was the last time, where he felt happy. Um, and, you know, he was a man of many regrets and just, it's not the sled itself, but what the sled represents.
yeah. I think there are even like some shots like during the that scene where he's like playing out on the sled where you can like see the name. Like it's not as emphasized as
Yeah.
like the close up shot at the end where it's being burned, but
Yeah.
like they don't exactly hide it either, you know. Uh like the
There's also some people say that it's a plot hole that no one was there to hear him say Rosebud, but there's that butler with the
yeah,
funny Italian accent or whatever who says that he heard him say that. So yeah,
it's like like
some people will just not be paying attention to a film and be like, "Hey, wait a minute, the plot hole." And then everybody just accepts that
yeah,
because they also don't pay attention to the film or they never saw it.
yeah. They're like operating under the logic of, well, we never saw the character in the frame, but like the it's like that's because it's not important to that shot. You can just
Yeah.
infer from information later in the film that he was like standing by on his master's deathbed if he was needed for anything, which is
Hmm.
what you would expect a butler to do. Going back to Rosebud, I don't think like Even if they didn't have that shot at the end, that last scene at the end where they reveal it's his sled, the film would like play out exactly the same
Yeah.
anyways.
You know
It's
what
about
would have been really cool if they didn't have that shot and you could just see it from the sled before, and then a lot of people would be like, "Well, what the hell's Rosebud?" And then like people would be rewatching the film to finally find out what it was. That'd be like some art house type of thing,
yeah,
though.
that would have been clever. I honestly would have preferred that, but
I
you
feel
know,
like I wouldn't have noticed that though.
yeah. Uh, you could go back and forth on whether or not that last scene is necessary just to like tie up any loose ends. But like, the
Definitely
guy,
for Hollywood audiences because they can't handle ambiguity.
yeah, can't handle and don't have any of that media comprehension. Us dumb fat Americans.
Media literacy.
Can I just say I think
Ludonarrative dissonance.
Yeah. Can I just say I think that like Twitter misuses the word media literacy for like the dumbest shit imaginable.
Yeah.
Like it
Let's not talk about Twitter anymore, though, because it's not a real place.
Yeah. Well, it won't be pretty soon. Pretty soon we'll all be free. Fingers crossed. But yeah, going back to like, the Rosebud thing, the the newsreel guy uh sums it up like the film starts with everyone wanting to know what Rosebud is. His bosses want to know what Rosebud is so that they can like put an angle to his death and say we know who he was when he was alive, and see he has it's sort
Yeah.
of like he has this perspective, after he's like done all this investigating where it's like you can't really sum up who a person was with just like a word, you know. And I think that's a nice parallel to like Kane himself. Both of these characters, they work in this sort of media landscape where like the truth
Actually,
what
actually, you can sum up your mom with the word whore.
you better take that back. I don't know.
Uh, when I say your mom, I obviously I mean like uh, you're like never mind.
The viewer's mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. That's fine. But like I like that like parallel where there's these two guys who are like working in this some version of the media landscape, where it's like they have an angle and a way to sensationalize and dramatize and make a story out of real events. But it's like, ultimately he comes out, with the insight that you can't really like boil down someone's personal life and character and failings and triumphs and all that to just like a story to be told. Uh, Whereas Kane sort of like treated his newspaper as like a way to spin narratives, a way to make people believe whatever he wanted them to believe.
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought that was a pretty pretty clever way to tie the film up. You didn't really need the rosebud shot.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Uh, any final thoughts on the film or
I think it is a very good film. One of my favorite films from the 1940s. Um, I think it's very like it's an awesome film. I wouldn't put it among like my favorite films like of all time, like among, the best of the best, like for me, or at least like my very favorites, but I definitely put it in like my top 100 and I have seen a lot of movies, so that is high praise.
yeah.
Um But yeah, you know, like the only problems that I have with the film are very, very minor, very minuscule. Um, you know, I think that it's a valid opinion to not even have it as your favorite Orson Welles film because he's made actually several good movies,
Yeah.
several very good movies.
It's definitely his most well-known film,
Yeah,
but I feel like people put too much stock into this as being his legacy, you know?
yeah,
We all know that Transformers the movie is where he really peaked.
true, but he didn't direct that.
Yeah. It would have been
Um,
funny if he did.
yeah, um, yeah. Then towards the end, he was just in like wine commercials and shit, and I think he was on Sesame Street.
I did not know
But
that.
I mean, I think so.
Let
Yeah.
me look that up.
Yeah. No, yeah. Let me look it up real quick. Um.
He's on the Muppet Wiki.
Oh yeah. No. Yeah. He was in one of the Muppet. He was in the Muppet movie. That was it. Not the Sesame Street.
That's
But
pretty
yeah.
funny.
So Orson Welles, cool guy. Citizen Kane, good movie. You know, anyone who goes to film school will inevitably see this film and either say it's all right, or man, this is the most overrated movie of all time. Marvel movies are way better, um, or something like that. Um, but yeah, I really like it, and if you have even a casual interest in the history of film, I would recommend it, and maybe you might even have fun with it. Um, yeah, I would give it a 9 out of 10, and would
uh,
absolutely recommend it.
I'd probably just give it a 10 out of 10, honestly, because,
Yeah,
you know, it's not, there are films that I find better, you know, uh,
like
even some,
Interstellar.
yeah, no, even some contemporary films, but, this is just like one of those films that, like, regardless of its own legacy, it just stands on its own merits. And any, yeah, like you said, any flaw you had, you could find in this film, bird jump scares aside, is really minor. Uh, I'm sort of coming at this from the angle of someone who did not get to see this in film school. Or, well, I mean, I never went to film school. College, I never got to see this in any of my college film classes, and I've
That's
always,
film school basically.
yeah, I've always been like putting it off. But when I finally got around to seeing it, I was not disappointed. It, to me, it lived up to the hype. So for as
That's
much
nice.
for as much hype as you can put behind a cerebral sort of art house film anyway, uh, you know. And just
Yeah,
anyways, I sort of like make a separation between like my favorite media and like media I consider the best. And regardless of how I feel about like my favorite movies in terms of like best movies I've seen, this would probably go into like the top 15 or 20 anyway. So, yeah, you should watch this film, you know, uh do it for the green peas.
yeah,
Yeah. All right. So now it's time for my recommendation. And I promised, there's a little backstory behind this. I promised one of my mutuals from one of my Discord servers, you know who you are if you're watching this, that I would see this for them. And I decided to make it an episode of the podcast. So next up is a Miyazaki film. It is I have not seen a lot of his films. I've certainly not seen this one. It is Howl's Moving Castle. So
Hmm.
we'll get back to you with that
Very
delicious,
spooky film.
yeah, with that delicious Studio Ghibli food for you know, when we come back.
Why anime food always looks so good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll be cool.
All right.
Um, yeah. Well, see you then.
All right. Peace.